A powerful billionaire stands on his Miami penthouse balcony, 40 stories above the city lights. Champagne glasses sparkle. Cameras roll. And in front of him stands his maid, a young Jamaican woman with fear in her eyes and truth on her tongue. He smirks, says something cruel, and then pushes her. The world had seen arrogance before, but never broadcast this loud. Never wrapped in silk suits and golden laughter. Below the skyline, music thumped and fireworks burst. Above it, a scream tore through the humid night air. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause, crystal glasses frozen mid-air, the crowd silent, phones rising in disbelief. Then her body fell. A drone camera, hired to film the party for social media, caught everything: the blur of her uniform, the terror in her eyes, the billionaire's grin framed by a wall of glittering glass. Amancia Brown plummeted toward the city that had never seen her, the wind stealing her voice, the lights of the penthouse shrinking to a cruel constellation above. 2 floors down, her body crashed through a steel awning with a metallic scream that echoed across the street. Gasps broke out. A few guests rushed to the railing. Most turned away, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, the music resumed. Laughter returned, awkward at first, then louder, desperate to drown out guilt. Mike Waveman brushed invisible dust from his white linen sleeve and said coldly, "Clean that up." He turned, face lit by neon from the skyline, and walked back into the glow of his own empire. Outside, cameras kept rolling. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice whispered, "Did he really just push her?" Another replied, "You didn't see anything. Not if you want to keep your job." But the internet had already seen. And the world was about to. She hit the awning hard enough to splinter metal, then rolled into darkness, body broken but alive. Pain pulsed through every breath. Somewhere above, the laughter continued, proof that her life had meant nothing to the man who thought he owned gravity itself. Her mind drifted between agony and awareness. She whispered through cracked lips, "You will not win, not tonight." Because what no one knew, not the guests, not the cameras, not even the man who had tried to erase her, was that Amancia Brown had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She had entered that penthouse with a secret, and even as blood pooled beneath her, that secret was already moving through the clouds of the internet, files, blueprints, evidence, waiting for the world to notice. Above her, the lights of Skyhaven burned like judgment. Below her, the city buzzed with the kind of energy that comes before revelation. Welcome to Tales of an Observer, where truth, dignity, and courage meet in the stories we can't afford to forget. Now, before we get deep into the story, I would love to request a little favor from you. Please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment telling me the city where you're watching from around the world. And also, please share this story with your loved ones. Now, let's get back into the story and see what unfolds. But to understand how a maid ended up 40 stories above the ground, staring death in the face, we have to go back to the shining towers of Miami, to the man who built his kingdom on lies and concrete. His name was Mike Waveman, and before the fall, he was the city's untouchable golden man. In Miami, people spoke of Mike Waveman the way sailors spoke of storms, in half whispers, half admiration, half fear. He was the man who could turn swampland into skyline, who could make politicians disappear with a phone call and rebuild the laws around his interests. His name glimmered on billboards, on luxury condos, on charity galas that smelled of expensive champagne and quiet corruption. Waveman Developments, Waveman Properties, Waveman Resorts. Every tower he built reached higher, as if he was trying to convince the sky to kneel. From a distance, he looked like everything America worshipped: tan skin, white smile, designer watch, a man who turned nothing into empire. But up close, his charm was a blade. Mike Waveman was the kind of man who didn't just crave power, he consumed it. His penthouse, Skyhaven, was more fortress than home. 42 floors above the city, it overlooked Biscayne Bay, its walls all glass and steel, the kind of architecture that screamed perfection while hiding rot. Every morning, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, espresso in hand, watching cranes lift more of his legacy into the clouds. He loved that sound, the metallic clang of progress. It was the sound of him winning. Assistants moved around him like nervous satellites. None of them spoke unless spoken to. The staff had learned quickly. Mike didn't like mistakes, didn't tolerate noise, and didn't believe in apologies. "Careful, sir," one of them once joked weakly. "You're so high up, even the clouds might sue you for trespassing." Mike had laughed, that sharp, controlled laugh that never touched his eyes. "Then I'll buy the sky," he said. It wasn't a joke. In his world, money wasn't currency, it was gravity. Everything and everyone orbited him because he decided they should. When city inspectors questioned his building permits, he hosted them at five-star dinners. When activists protested his construction sites, he sent donations to their organizations, hush money disguised as generosity. The mayor called him a visionary. The press called him the architect of the new Miami. Behind closed doors, his employees called him the executioner. He had fired a man once for sneezing during a board meeting, another for spilling coffee on a guest's shoes. He never yelled, he just smiled when he did it. That was worse. On the night the news named him Philanthropist of the Year, Mike threw a party so large the mayor himself arrived by helicopter. A jazz band played on the terrace, the pool shimmered with gold lights, and the city's elite toasted to the man who made Miami shine. Every table was decorated with white orchids imported from Singapore. The air reeked of wealth and fear. Among the crowd, invisible and silent, moved the staff. Waiters, drivers, maids, all wearing crisp white uniforms. Their job was to serve and to vanish, to smile and to be forgotten. And somewhere among them, for the first time, was Amancia Brown. She had joined Waveman Estates 3 weeks earlier. The other maid said she was quiet but sharp, the kind who learned everything in silence. She moved through the marble halls like she'd studied them. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her hair pinned tight beneath her cap. When she passed by the mirrored walls, she didn't see a maid, she saw a mission. That night, as she polished the glass staircase leading to the terrace, she caught sight of Mike Waveman himself across the room. He stood under a crystal chandelier, his hand resting casually on the mayor's shoulder, laughing at something only powerful men found funny. His smile was polished, his charm rehearsed. For a brief second, Amancia froze. The memory of home, of bulldozers, smoke, and screams, flared behind her eyes. She saw her mother's house, half collapsed under Waveman's resort trucks. She saw the sign that read, "Future Site of Paradise Vista," by Waveman Developments. And she heard his voice from a news interview back then. Progress always has casualties. You can't build paradise without clearing the jungle. To him, her people had been the jungle. Amancia blinked away the tears and kept polishing. No one noticed the quiet fury in her reflection. From across the room, Waveman's gaze briefly flicked toward her. Just long enough to confirm that she was, to him, background noise. He lifted his glass, smiled at the cameras, and whispered to the mayor, "They clean up nicely, don't they?" The mayor laughed, not sure if it was a joke. Later that night, when the party was over, the staff began their real work, clearing, washing, restoring the illusion of perfection. Amancia was assigned to the executive office. That's where she saw it for the first time. A blueprint hanging on the wall behind his desk. The design was unmistakable. The layout, the coastal mapping, even the coral reef outline. It was Rosefield, her village. The title block read, Paradise Vista Resort, Phase 2 Expansion. Her fingers trembled as she wiped dust from the frame. She had spent years searching for proof that Mike Waveman's company had stolen land using falsified deeds. And here, in plain sight, it hung as decoration. A trophy of destruction. The next morning, she started her plan. Each night, when Mike left the office, she stayed an extra few minutes to finish cleaning. In reality, she was scanning documents with a hidden pen drive, copies of permits, offshore transfers, and emails between Mike and corrupt officials in Kingston. She named the folder Blueprint. And every night, she backed it up in the cloud. The staff whispered about her dedication. She's too quiet, one said. She's too smart, said another. They didn't know she wasn't just cleaning. She was dismantling an empire, one secret at a time. Mike noticed her eventually. Of course he did. He noticed everything that could threaten him. One afternoon, while giving a tour to foreign investors, he caught her rearranging files on his desk. He paused, his voice still calm but his eyes cold. "New girl," he said, "you seem very attentive." "Yes, Mr. Waveman," she replied, her accent soft but firm. He smiled slightly. "Where did you say you're from again?" "Kingston, sir." His gaze lingered. "Jamaica. Beautiful place. My company helped develop some of the resorts there. You should be proud." She forced a polite nod. Inside, her blood burned. That night, she sat in her small service quarters overlooking the city, her fingers shaking as she typed a message to an anonymous journalist. "I have evidence linking Waveman developments to illegal land seizures in the Caribbean. I'll release it soon. If anything happens to me, the files are scheduled to auto-upload." She hit send. In the reflection of her window, she could see the tower lights blinking like red warnings in the fog. Far below, the city lived unaware. Taxis, neon signs, the ocean stretching beyond. But in that tiny room, history was shifting. Meanwhile, in his penthouse suite, Mike stood on his balcony, watching lightning flash across the bay. His wife, Sabrina, joined him, wrapping a silk robe tighter around her shoulders. "You work too much," she said softly. "You don't even sleep anymore." He didn't answer. His eyes traced the skyline. "Do you ever think," she continued, "that maybe we've climbed too high?" He smiled faintly. "If you want to see the stars, Sabrina, you have to leave the ground." She sighed, walking away. "Just remember, stars burn out too." He didn't hear her. Or maybe he didn't care. The next morning, a headline splashed across the Miami Herald. Whistleblower claims major developer linked to Caribbean land fraud. Waveman's PR team dismissed it as conspiracy. But his phone rang all day. Investors panicked. And somewhere deep in the system, his cyber team detected a breach. Someone had accessed his files. At 11:47 p.m., he opened the security feed. There, on the grainy footage, was Amancia Brown, copying documents from his computer. He didn't call the police. He didn't call security. He smiled. Because Mike Waveman wasn't the kind of man who pressed charges. He was the kind who made examples. He poured himself a drink and whispered to his reflection, "You wanted to see how the rich live, sweetheart? Tomorrow night, you'll see how they make you fall." And outside his window, thunder rolled over Miami. The kind of thunder that sounds like justice waiting its turn. The world would come to know her as the maid who fell from the sky, but before she became a headline, before she stood 40 stories above Miami, Amancia Brown was a dreamer, a builder, a believer, a girl who thought blueprints could change the world. St. Mary Parish, Jamaica. 4 years earlier, the sun had just begun to rise over the green hills of Rosefield. Mist curled around the banana trees like silk. The air smelled of damp soil, sea breeze, and fresh bread from Miss Claudette's corner bakery. On a small wooden porch overlooking the village, 22-year-old Amancia sat barefoot with a pencil tucked behind her ear and a roll of drafting paper across her knees. She wasn't sketching mansions or hotels. She was drawing homes, real ones. The kind built from recycled bamboo and local stone, roofs designed to catch rainwater, windows angled to cool rooms naturally. Low cost, high dignity, she used to say, tapping her pencil with pride. People deserve beauty even if they're poor. Her mother, Nadine Brown, would smile, stirring her morning tea. And one day, you gon' build your own house, my baby? A big one. With flowers on the porch, just like this. Amancia would grin. Bigger than this, Mama. For all of us. By her final year at the University of Technology in Kingston, Amancia was one of the most promising architecture students in the Caribbean. Her thesis project, Eco-Villages, Sustainable Housing for the Tropics, won regional awards and attracted attention from international donors. Her village was proud. Her mother framed her certificate and hung it beside a faded picture of Amancia's late father, a fisherman who died when she was 12. Everything seemed possible. Until the letters came. Official government envelopes stamped with foreign seals. Notice of Development Clearance Land Acquisition authorized under Section 12. The papers said Rosefield would soon be transformed into a world-class seaside resort under a new investor group called Waveman Resorts Ltd. The villagers were promised compensation, relocation, economic growth. But weeks passed. No payments came. Only bulldozers. The morning the machines arrived, Amancia stood in the road holding her sketchbook. Men in hard hats shouted at her to move. She refused. Behind her, women wept. Children clung to their mothers. The houses, painted in bright Caribbean colors, trembled under the engines. "This land no belong to you," she shouted. "You sign just take it." One of the men pointed to a paper. "You people sign contract." She looked closer. The signatures were forged, fake names scribbled across lines that once bore her neighbor's real ones. Her stomach turned cold. Then came the roar. The bulldozers rolled forward. Her mother screamed her name as the first house collapsed. That night, the stars hung low and silent. Smoke rose where homes had stood. Her mother sat in shock on a broken chair, hands trembling, lips whispering prayers that had lost their words. She kept asking, "Where we going now, Amancia? Where we sleep tonight?" But Amancia had no answer. The next morning, her mother's body gave out. Collapsed heart, the doctors said, trauma-induced. She survived, but never walked again without help. Hospital bills swallowed the little savings they had left. And by the time Amancia graduated, Rosefield was gone. On the same land, construction crews erected steel fences stamped with the words, "Paradise Vista, own your piece of heaven." A few months later, on the evening news, she saw the man behind it all. Mike Waveman, smiling for cameras, white suit gleaming, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Progress always has sacrifices," he told the reporter. "The land wasn't being used efficiently. We're building opportunity, not taking it." Amancia's hands shook as she watched. Her mind burned with the sound of engines, her mother's cry, the taste of dust in her throat. That night she made a promise. If justice couldn't find him, she would. 2 years later, Miami, Florida. The first step was learning everything about him. Waveman Developments, Waveman Properties, offshore subsidiaries, campaign donations. Every press release, every speech, every photo op became a thread in the web she mapped across her small apartment wall in Kingston. When she discovered that his American branch frequently hired foreign domestic workers through hospitality sponsorships, she found her doorway in. She applied under a false name, Amancia Brown, claiming limited education, a fabricated background, and a spotless work record. Weeks later, the email arrived. Approved. Flight and work placement to Miami confirmed. Employer, Waveman Estates. Her chest tightened as she read it. It felt like betrayal and destiny combined. The moment she stepped into the shimmering lobby of Skyhaven, she realized she was in the belly of the monster. Marble floors, gold railings, walls that seemed to breathe money. She bowed her head and spoke softly to the head housekeeper, pretending to be the shy newcomer. But every movement was deliberate, every word memorized. She wasn't there to clean. She was there to collect. Her room was small, a service dorm tucked behind the east wing, but it gave her access to the staff corridors that ran through the building like veins. Every night, after her shift ended, she walked those corridors quietly, learning the mansion's rhythm. When cameras rotated, when guards switched posts, when Mike Waveman's office lights went off. She noted where he kept his keycards, how often he used his encrypted laptop, and the security codes his assistants punched into the elevator. She worked methodically, almost surgically. By her second week, she had duplicated the office key using a 3D printed mold hidden inside her cleaning cart. By the third, she had memorized his passwords, gleaned from reflection on his phone screen as he scrolled through emails while she refilled his drink. By the fourth, she'd already installed a miniature flash drive inside the CPU of his office computer, disguised as a standard connector. It was slow work, but steady. Each night, she saved the data into a folder labeled Blueprint. Inside were contracts, government letters, wire transfers, deeds, everything connecting Waveman to illegal land seizures across Jamaica and Belize. She hid copies in multiple places. A USB key taped under her bed frame, an encrypted cloud backup, and an auto-upload trigger that would activate if she ever went missing for more than 48 hours. She wasn't just gathering proof. She was protecting herself from erasure. The more time she spent inside the penthouse, the clearer it became. The same arrogance that had destroyed her home pulsed through every inch of Skyhaven. Mike bragged openly to guests about building paradise. He showed off scale models of new resorts planned for other islands. "They say I'm ruthless," he laughed one evening, swirling wine. "But the world belongs to those who take it." Amancia's heart twisted. He didn't remember her. Didn't even recall the name of Rosefield, the village he'd erased. To him, she was a face among the help. Invisible. And that invisibility became her armor. Still, there were nights when fear clawed at her resolve. She'd lie in her narrow cot, watching the blinking light of her hidden drive, wondering if it was enough, if one woman could really fight a man who owned the system itself. Then she'd close her eyes and hear her mother's voice. "Baby girl, you were born to build, even if it's justice you build from rubble." And she'd whisper back, "Me nah stop, mama. Not till him pay." Weeks turned to months. The data pile grew. And somewhere between the quiet hours of midnight cleaning and dawn light spilling through the marble halls, Amancia began to feel the weight of what she carried. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was her village, her people, her mother's breath, still trapped in that last cry. Then came the news segment that changed everything. A local reporter exposed new allegations of corruption involving Waveman properties. The story barely lasted one evening, but it was enough to send the company's cybersecurity into overdrive. Firewalls, password changes, digital sweeps. And that's when they found it. A breach, a trace, a shadow of an unauthorized data copy inside Mike Waveman's system. Within hours, his private security identified the device. The next morning, Amancia noticed men in suits reviewing footage from the office. One of them looked at her a second too long. She smiled faintly, pretending not to notice. But inside, she knew. The clock had started ticking. That night, as thunder rolled across the Atlantic, She packed her bag, not to run, but to prepare. She uploaded the last batch of evidence. She printed copies of her fake identification and hid them inside a cleaning supply drawer. And she wrote a note to herself, folded in the pages of her mother's Bible. If I fall, make sure he falls too. Then she turned off the lights and whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow we finish this." Morning sunlight poured through the penthouse windows like liquid gold, glinting off marble floors so polished they could blind you. From the outside, Sky Haven looked like the pinnacle of success: glass walls, chrome edges, a view that touched the clouds. But from within, it was something else entirely. A cage of mirrors. A house of fear. Every inch of that place reflected Mike Waveman's power. His taste, his control, his arrogance. Even the silence belonged to him. The staff spoke in whispers, their eyes down, their movements precise. Every tray had to align perfectly on the dining table, every glass had to be spotless enough to reflect Mike's smile. He wasn't the kind of man who yelled when displeased. He didn't need to. One look, a raised brow, a slow sip from his drink, was enough to make hearts race and hands shake. It was a Thursday evening when the first of the summer parties began. Politicians, bankers, celebrities, all gathered in that glittering fortress 40 floors above the bay. Violinists played soft jazz near the infinity pool, where champagne flowed like water and laughter echoed like something rehearsed. Amancia moved silently among them, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. She was invisible, just how she needed to be. But she saw everything. The governor's nervous smile as Mike whispered something in his ear. The way the councilman's wife clutched her pearls when a staff member passed too close. And the way Mike Waveman stood at the center of it all, soaking in admiration like a god surveying his worshippers. He raised his glass and said with that trademark smirk, "They said I couldn't build this city from dirt. But look around you. I built it, and if you're under me, that's exactly where you belong." Laughter followed. The kind of laughter that only exists in rooms where no one dares to disagree. Amancia felt a flicker of disgust, but she kept her eyes down, the mask of obedience perfectly intact. Later, in the kitchen, the other maids whispered quietly while scrubbing glasses. "Did you hear what he said?" one muttered. "He always says things like that," another replied. "Best thing you can do is pretend you didn't." Amancia didn't respond. She was too focused on memorizing the pattern of guests, the movements of security, the way Mike's assistant keyed in passwords to his tablet between toasts. She was learning the rhythm of his empire, every detail another step in her plan. Around midnight, when the guests had gone and the last bottle had been cleared away, Amancia wheeled a cleaning cart toward the elevator. That's when she met Luis, one of the night security guards. He was middle-aged, soft-spoken, with eyes that carried quiet worry. He had the look of someone who'd seen things and decided silence was safer than truth. He nodded at her. "You new here, right?" She smiled politely. 3 months. He lowered his voice. "Then listen carefully. People who cross Mr. Waveman don't stay long. Some quit. Some get fired. Some just disappear." Her hand paused on the mop handle. "Disappear?" Luis shrugged. "I don't ask questions. But I've worked this place 10 years, and I've seen enough to know. Don't stand too close to the glass if he's behind you." It was meant as a joke, but the warning in his tone was real. Amancia met his eyes for a moment and said softly, "Thanks for the advice." He nodded and walked away, keys jingling like small bells in the dark. Days bled into weeks. The penthouse never slept. It only changed faces. Mornings were for business meetings, evenings for parties, nights for quiet threats disguised as deals. Mike moved through it all like a shark through clear water, confident, cold, unstoppable. His wife, Sabrina, drifted in his shadow like a ghost wrapped in silk. She was beautiful but brittle, her smile stretched thin. She had the kind of grace that looked practiced, the kind that hides bruises too deep to see. One afternoon, while Amancia was dusting the upstairs library, Sabrina entered quietly, a glass of wine in her hand. "Alicia, isn't it?" she asked, using the name on Amancia's false ID. "Yes, ma'am," Amancia replied, bowing slightly. Sabrina studied her for a moment. "You're not like the others. You think before you speak. I can tell." Amancia froze. "I just try to do my job well, ma'am." Sabrina smiled faintly. "Of course you do. You remind me of myself when I was young, before I realized this house eats people alive." She placed the glass on the table, her eyes drifting toward the skyline. "Be careful, Alicia. In this place, kindness looks like weakness, and intelligence looks like threat." Then she left, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the faint echo of loneliness. That night, Amancia couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed Luis's warning and Sabrina's words. This house eats people alive. She thought of her mother, of Rosefield, of the bulldozers, of the white letters on the screen that had destroyed her world. Waveman Resorts Ltd. She knew she was getting closer to the truth, but she also knew that every step forward tightened the noose around her neck. Still, she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when justice was this close. The next day, Mike held another meeting, this time with 2 foreign investors from the Cayman Islands. Amancia was tasked with serving coffee and keeping her head down. But her ears were open. From behind the glass divider, she heard one of the men mention new resort expansions in the Caribbean. Mike leaned back, his tone casual but sharp. "Cheap land. Easy labor. Governments down there don't care what you build as long as you pay the right people. That's the beauty of it." The men laughed. "And the locals?" one asked. Mike shrugged. "You move them. Offer them a little compensation, make it sound legal. Half of them can't even read the documents they sign." The men chuckled again, clinking their glasses. Amancia's grip tightened around the coffee tray. Her heart thudded painfully. He hadn't changed. Not even a trace of remorse. She pretended to wipe the table, her hand sliding near his desk. The phone in her pocket was already recording. Every word, every laugh, every cruelty. That evening, while the others cleaned the ballroom, Amancia slipped into Mike's office. The lights were dim, the city glimmering beyond the glass wall. She plugged in her encrypted flash drive and opened the financial folder on his desktop. Her breath caught. The screen displayed a series of wire transfers. Millions of dollars moved through offshore accounts in Belize, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands. Each transaction was tied to a coded project name: PVJAM, PVBL, PVDOM. She clicked on PVM. A scanned document appeared. Her blood froze. Project: Paradise Vista, Rosefield site clearance. Her village. Her home. The signature line at the bottom bore Mike Waveman's digital seal. The date matched the week her mother had collapsed. For a long moment, Amancia couldn't breathe. The truth she'd chased for years, the proof that had cost her everything, was here, sitting under his name like an open wound. A sound startled her, the soft ding of the elevator. Her pulse spiked. She yanked the flash drive from the port, slid it into her pocket, and quickly wiped the desktop. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She ducked behind the marble column just as Mike entered, phone to his ear. "Yes, transfer the funds to the Cayman account." "No, they won't trace it. I've got local officials eating from my hand." "The Jamaican property?" Done. He paced the floor, oblivious to the woman crouched 10 feet away, recording every word through her phone's mic. "Cheap land, cheap labor," he said with a chuckle. "That's how paradise is built." The words hit her like a blade. He ended the call and stood by the window, gazing out at the skyline. For a moment, he looked almost reflective. Then he smiled to himself, whispering, "I own this city." He didn't realize someone else had just stolen his crown. When he finally left, Amancia exhaled shakily. Her hands trembled as she stopped the recording and backed away from the desk. She knew this was it, the evidence that could destroy him. But as she looked around the office, at the glass walls and mirrored ceilings, a chill ran through her. She realized the awful truth. This house wasn't just built from glass. It was made for watching. Cameras. Everywhere. She glanced up at the small blinking red light in the corner. Her stomach dropped. He might have seen everything. That night, in her small quarters, she hid the flash drive inside the lining of her shoe. Her thoughts raced. If the cameras caught her, she was finished. If they didn't, she still had to find a way to get the files out safely. Either way, she was running out of time. She stared out the window at the glittering towers of Miami, whispering to herself, "He built a house of glass. Let's see how fast it shatters." The next morning, the air inside Skyhaven felt different. So heavy. Watching. Amancia sensed it before anyone said a word, that shift in energy that comes when danger is already in the room but hasn't yet spoken its name. Mike Waveman arrived earlier than usual. He walked through the glass corridors with a calm that made the staff more nervous than his anger ever did. His reflection followed him in every wall, every polished surface. 100 versions of the same smirking god. His phone was pressed to his ear. "I want answers. Now," he said, voice smooth but sharp as a blade. He ended the call, then smiled faintly at the nearest maid, who immediately dropped her gaze. Something was wrong. In the penthouse control room, a space most staff didn't even know existed, Mike's cybersecurity team huddled around a bank of monitors. The flicker of code washed across their faces. "Sir, it's not external," one of the analysts said, swallowing hard. "The breach came from inside." Mike's jaw tightened. "Inside?" The man nodded. "Yes, sir. Around midnight, access was logged under your admin account. Someone copied several folders from your personal drive, project files, financials, emails." Mike's fingers drummed on the glass table. "And you didn't stop it?" "We only caught it after the transfer attempt. Whoever did it used a disguised device, likely encrypted. But we traced the terminal location." He turned the monitor. The security feed flickered, time-stamped 12:41 a.m. There she was. Amancia, dressed in her plain gray uniform, hair tied back, moving quietly through his office. The footage showed her sliding something, a flash drive, into the port, then removing it. His expression didn't change, but the silence around him grew colder. "Zoom in." The analyst did. The camera froze on Amancia's face, half-shadowed, half-lit. Focused. A maid. In his office. Mike leaned back in his chair, chuckling softly. Well, little Miss Brown." By noon, the entire building seemed to hum with unease. Mike hadn't confronted her. Not yet. That wasn't his style. He didn't fire people, he performed their downfall. For him, humiliation was theater, and he always liked an audience. He called Vivian his executive assistant. "Let's schedule something for tonight," he said. "A rooftop gathering. Tell the staff it's for appreciation." Vivian blinked. "Appreciation, sir?" "Yes," he said, smiling. "They've been loyal. Especially one of them." That evening, as the sky bled into shades of coral and violet, the rooftop was transformed. String lights twinkled like stars. A buffet table gleamed with silver trays. The staff, tired, cautious, gathered in nervous clusters. None of them could understand what was happening. Mike Waveman never threw parties for his employees. He stood near the edge of the balcony, wearing his signature white suit, champagne flute in hand. The city glowed beneath him, reflections of gold and blue shimmering off every skyscraper. "Tonight," he began, voice amplified just enough to command attention, "I want to thank each of you. This tower, this company, none of it would stand without your work." A few polite claps. Hesitant smiles. He looked directly at Amancia. "And some of you," he continued, his grin tightening, "have gone above and beyond. Quietly, efficiently, fearlessly." Her stomach turned. She could feel his gaze pinning her in place like a butterfly in glass. "Amancia," he said, extending his hand, "come join me for a toast." Every eye turned toward her. She hesitated, but his tone left no room for refusal. "Go on," whispered one of the other maids. "Don't make him mad." She stepped forward, heart pounding beneath her uniform. When she reached him, he smiled, too kind, too rehearsed. He handed her a glass of champagne. "You've been a breath of fresh air in this place," he said smoothly. "Hardworking. Honest. I see that." His voice was honey, but his eyes were knives. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, forcing a smile. He raised his glass. "To loyalty. To good employees who know their place." The crowd laughed uneasily. Amancia lifted her glass, though her hands trembled slightly. He leaned closer, whispering near her ear, "You thought I wouldn't find out?" Her heart skipped. He clinked his glass against hers, still smiling for the watching guests. "Enjoy the view, Amancia. It's a long way down." The laughter returned. The staff thought it was another one of his cruel jokes. But Amancia knew better. That tone. The way he lingered near the balcony railing. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. She felt the walls closing in, the air thickening. She needed to get out, to think, but leaving would draw attention. Mike stepped away from her and began chatting with the guests, his mood suddenly bright. He told stories, cracked jokes, poured drinks, but his eyes never left her for long. Every time she looked up, he was watching. Downstairs, Louise stood by the service elevator, uneasy. He'd been told to stay off the roof, which was strange enough. He checked the security monitor briefly. The rooftop feed was live, but then, suddenly, it glitched. Static, then black. His instinct screamed. Something was about to happen. Back upstairs, Mike raised his glass again. One more toast. The staff turned toward him, exhausted but obedient. "To loyalty," he said again. "And to those who forget it, may they remember who built this tower." He turned to Amancia, eyes gleaming. "Come, Amancia. You do remember who built it, don't you?" Her voice was steady, but her words were deliberate. "Yes, sir. I remember exactly who did." A few guests chuckled, sensing tension but too afraid to intervene. Mike's smile didn't falter, but his jaw tightened slightly. For a long moment, the two of them stood there, predator and prey, but neither willing to blink first. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're smarter than you look, but not smart enough." Her throat went dry. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "You think deleting the footage from my camera made you invisible? You forgot one thing, sweetheart. I own the sky. Every inch of this building breathes my name." Her blood ran cold. He knew all of it. Still, she didn't move. She refused to give him the satisfaction of fear. She met his gaze and said quietly, "Then you already know what's coming." He froze, just for a fraction of a second. Then his grin widened. "You've got spirit. I'll give you that." He stepped back, gesturing to the skyline. "Miami, a city built by dreamers. By people like me." His tone turned theatrical again, as if he'd forgotten their private exchange entirely. "Let's raise a glass to the empire we've built together." The crowd cheered, oblivious to the tension sparking between them. But Amancia wasn't cheering. Her hand, still gripping the champagne flute, was trembling, not with fear, but with fury. Because now she knew exactly what he planned. He wasn't going to fire her. He wasn't even going to threaten her privately. He was going to make an example of her, the same way he built everything else. Publicly. Brutally. She set the glass down on the table, quietly. "Thank you, sir," she said, turning toward the door. "I should get back to cleaning." But he stopped her with a hand on her shoulder, firm, cold. "Don't rush off," he said, smiling. "You're the star of the night." The crowd clapped again. Amancia felt her pulse hammering in her throat. The city lights shimmered in her eyes. She knew this was it, the beginning of whatever trap he'd set. And as Mike raised his glass one last time, she forced herself to stand tall beside him, calm as ever. If this was his stage, she'd play her role until the curtain fell. He leaned close again, voice barely audible over the music. "You wanted to show the world what kind of man I am, didn't you? Careful what you wish for, Amancia." Her jaw tightened. "I already know, sir. But soon, the world will too." Their eyes locked. The smile faded from his lips, only for a second, then returned, broader, sharper. He turned back to the crowd, voice booming, "A toast to loyalty that reaches the heavens." And as the glasses rose, the Miami skyline flickered with lightning on the horizon, a storm building in the distance. A storm neither of them could stop. Would you accept a toast from a man who destroyed your home? Tell me in the comments. The storm that had been gathering all evening finally rolled in, not in the sky, but on the rooftop of Skyhaven, 42 floors above Miami. By the time night settled over the city, the penthouse terrace was transformed into a glittering spectacle. The wealthy elite mingled beneath strings of gold lights. Influencers adjusted their ring lights and filmed everything for their millions of followers. Live streamers narrated the party like it was a festival, not a gathering built on fear and quiet servitude. Miami's skyline shimmered like a jeweled crown behind them, each tower a monument to money, power, and secrets buried beneath concrete. Tonight, one of those secrets stood just a few feet from the edge. Amancia Brown stood by the buffet table, pretending to adjust napkins, though her hands shook slightly. She could feel Mike's eyes sweeping across the crowd like a spotlight searching for prey. And she knew she was the prey. Mike clapped his hands once, sharply, calling the room to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice booming with unearned confidence. "Thank you for joining me tonight. I have a special recognition to make." Influencers leaned in. Phones lifted. A nearby live streamer whispered dramatically into her mic. "Ooh, Waveman's about to do something messy. I can feel it." Mike raised his champagne glass. "Tonight, I want to honor someone very dear to this household. Someone who has served with dedication." His gaze found her across the terrace. "Amancia, come up here." Every muscle in her body tensed, but she forced her steps to remain calm. She walked toward him under the heavy weight of 60 pairs of privileged eyes. She felt like a lamb walking toward a stage where the butcher waited with a smile. Mike extended a hand, helping her step beside him, not out of kindness, but out of performance. "Tell me, Amancia," he said, voice silky and poisonous. "Where are you from?" The question, innocent to those watching, hit like a knife. She hesitated. For a moment, the rooftop stilled, wind, music, and laughter seeming to pause. A guest whispered too loudly, "She's from Jamaica, I think." Mike's lips curled into a grin. "Jamaica, huh?" he said. "You people sure know how to build." He leaned closer, his breath warm with champagne. "And how to fall." Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, some amused, some uncomfortable, some too drunk to care. But others shifted anxiously. Something felt wrong. Terrifyingly wrong. Mike placed an arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward the glass railing that bordered the terrace. The view below was dizzying: streets, cars, traffic lights glowing in tiny patterns like veins in the city's skin. She tried to step away, but his grip tightened. "So," he said casually, loudly enough for guests to hear, "I hear you've been staying late in my office. Burning the midnight oil." Her heartbeat roared in her ears, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes, sir. I clean everywhere I'm assigned." "Oh," he chuckled. "Is that what you call it? Cleaning?" The crowd shifted. Phone cameras rose again. "Mike," she whispered, "don't do this." He smiled wider. "Don't what, sweetheart?" She set her jaw. "You destroyed Rosefield," she said quietly but firmly. "You stole lives. I just showed the world." The whisper spread like flame. "Rosefield? What did she say? Is he involved in that?" Mike's face twitched. First confusion, then recognition, then rage. "You think you can accuse me?" he hissed. "In my house? In front of my guests?" She didn't look away. "I think the world deserves to know what you did." Something in him snapped. It happened in 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would replay a million times on phones, news broadcasts, courtroom screens. Mike stepped closer. His hand clenched. His voice dropped into something cold and feral. "You should have stayed invisible." Before she could breathe, before she could blink, he shoved her straight over the edge. Her scream ripped through the humid night as her body vanished into the darkness below. Gasps erupted. Several guests screamed. Phones tilted downward, filming her fall. One influencer shouted, "Oh my God, he pushed her! He pushed her!" Someone else sobbed. Someone fled the terrace. But the majority? They stood frozen, maw open, guilt strangling their tongues, fear gluing their feet to marble floor. A drone, programmed to capture panoramic shots of the party, had turned midair as the movement caught its lens. It recorded everything. Her fall. Mike's outstretched arm. His expression, rage melting into a chilling, almost satisfied smirk. The drone hovered, its red light blinking like an unblinking witness. Mike exhaled slowly, like he'd just released tension, not a human being. He straightened his jacket, turned to the silent, trembling crowd, and said the words that would later become infamous. "Cleanup crew, get the tarp." Someone dropped their phone. A woman gasped, covering her mouth with shaking hands. Luis, watching from the stairwell entrance, felt his knees buckle. A live streamer whispered into her mic, This man is a monster." Someone else backed away from Mike as if he were fire. But he wasn't finished. He raised his glass again, lifting it toward the night sky, toward the city he believed he owned. "To loyalty," he said softly. Not another person dared to toast him. Down below, sirens began to echo faintly through the streets, but no one yet knew whether they were coming for her or for him. Darkness held her for a while. Not peaceful darkness, but the kind that hurt, the kind filled with echoes of a scream she hadn't realized was her own. Then sound returned. Distant, metallic, like construction. Voices floated in and out of the fog in her head. Bro, look. No way. No freaking way. She fell from the tower, man. Check her pulse. Hurry. The world flickered back into focus. Pain exploded across her ribs, her shoulder, her left leg. Every breath felt like fire. But she was alive. She was breathing. Against all odds, she had landed on a steel scaffold 2 floors below the rooftop. A brutal fall, but not a fatal one. Above her, Skyhaven's balcony glowed like a distant, cruel halo. She heard one of the construction workers whisper, almost reverently, "She lived." Another man leaned over her with wide eyes. "Lady, don't move. We already called 911. And, we're recording this for evidence, okay? 'Cause what he did? That wasn't an accident. Everybody's gonna see." He held up his phone, the red recording light aimed not at her, but at the shattered awning she'd torn through, and the balcony far above where Mike Waveman still stood. His voice trembled as he spoke to his camera. "Yo, Miami, listen up. We just saw Waveman push his maid." He laughed. "And she survived. She's alive." The other worker swallowed hard. "Get the angle. The whole world needs to see this." Amancia closed her eyes. Her body felt broken. But her mind flared with something fierce. "It's starting." Within minutes, the workers' videos hit social media. At first, only a few reposts, a few shocked comments, a few disbelieving viewers. But then, the drone footage leaked. High definition. The fall, her scream, and Mike's unmistakable push. By dawn, the footage had hit every major platform. By sunrise, it had cracked 12 million views. By 9 a.m., it was unstoppable. Hashtag pushed her, hashtag Waveman exposed, hashtag Skyhaven scandal. 3 hashtags that flooded the internet overnight. TikTok took the clips and turned them into duets. Instagram Reels debated the moment frame by frame. Twitter erupted like a volcano. And on every morning show in America, anchors repeated the same chilling sentence. Who is the maid in the Waveman Tower video, and is she alive? A panel of news anchors sat in stiff silence as they watched the footage air live on national television. That is a clear shove," one anchor whispered. Another rubbed his forehead. "This is the most disturbing thing we've ever aired." A third added quietly, "If she survived that, she's a miracle." On political talk shows, commentators demanded investigations. On entertainment news, influencers cried on camera, outraged. Even celebrities chimed in, some posting black squares with the words, "Justice for Amancia Brown." Protesters appeared outside Waveman Tower by noon holding signs. "Accountability now. Arrest Mike Waveman. She's not a servant. She's a life." The world had turned. And the billionaire who once believed he was untouchable had awakened to a firestorm he could not buy his way out of. Inside Skyhaven, Mike's carefully constructed kingdom began to crack. His PR team swarmed him like panicked bees, each one frantic, sweating, terrified. "Sir, we need a statement." "No. No statements yet. We need to assess the situation." "Sir, TMZ just posted the footage. The drone angle. They're calling it attempted murder." Waveman holding stock is falling. "Sir, it's been 15 minutes and we're down 8%. It's all over the news, Mike. You need to..." "Shut up." His voice echoed across the glass walls of his office. Everyone froze. He forced a breath, smoothing a hand over his hair. "Okay," he said, quieter. "Here's what we tell them. It was a tragic accident. She slipped. I tried to save her." The PR manager swallowed. "Sir, the footage shows you laughing." Mike blinked. "So? Cut that part." "Sir, you can't cut livestream footage." Another employee burst into the room. "Mike, the construction workers uploaded their videos too. Their angles show." Mike slammed his fist into the desk. His golden empire, the one he'd built by crushing others, was collapsing one headline at a time. "Find her," he snarled. "Find the maid. We need to spin this. I want her location by the end of the day." But he was already too late. The world had found her before he could. Amancia awoke again, this time in a hospital room. White ceiling. Fluorescent lights. a soft beeping that matched her heartbeat. Every inch of her body ached. Her arm was splinted, 3 ribs fractured, her hip bruised black and purple. But she was breathing, alive. Alive when she wasn't supposed to be. A nurse hovered beside her. "You're safe," she whispered softly. "Police are outside. No one can get to you." "Police." Her breath caught. She tried to sit up, but pain streaked down her side. "Easy, sweetheart," the nurse said gently. "You took quite a fall." The fall. 42 floors. And somehow, she had survived. The nurse adjusted her blanket. "Your name's all over the news. People are praying for you, protesting for you." The whole world saw. A tear slipped from the corner of Amancia's eye. Not from pain. From the weight of a truth she had carried alone for too long. Now millions carried it with her. She turned toward the small TV mounted in the corner of the room. It was already playing. A reporter stood outside Waveman Tower, shouting over the sound of protesters behind her. "Hundreds of demonstrators have gathered here today, demanding the arrest of billionaire mogul Mike Waveman after dramatic drone footage surfaced online showing him pushing his maid from the 42nd floor of his penthouse balcony." The screen cut to the workers recording, the moment they found her. "She fell from the tower, bro. She's alive." The clip replayed again and again. Then more footage, Mike laughing seconds after she disappeared off the balcony. Amancia closed her eyes, tears burning across her bruised cheeks. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement, a reckoning, a mirror held up to every powerful man who thought the world would always kneel at his feet. And for the first time since she lost Rosefield, she didn't feel alone. By afternoon, everything had changed. Sponsors pulled out of Waveman Holdings. A major hotel chain severed ties. Miami senators publicly condemned him. Even city officials who once smiled beside him in photo ops now tweeted that they were shocked and disgusted. One headline flashed across the hospital TV. "Police seek to question Mike Waveman as attempted murder investigation opens." Another. "Who is Amancia Brown? The woman the world is calling a survivor." Her hands trembled as she reached for a cup of water. She stared at her reflection, swollen, bruised, breath still unsteady. She looked breakable. But the world looked at her and saw strength. In the hallway, the officer stationed outside her door spoke into his radio. "Yes, she's awake now. No, Waveman hasn't shown up here. But if he does? Don't worry. He won't get 2 feet past the lobby." It was the first time she'd heard someone say those words with confidence. He won't get to her. Not anymore. She leaned back against her pillow. Her eyes softened. Her breathing slowed. She had survived. Not just the fall, but the silence. The years of feeling invisible. The months of gathering evidence alone. But the world had woken up. And Mike Waveman had nowhere left to hide. She whispered to herself, not as a vow, but as a confirmation. "It's time." By the time the sun rose the next morning, Mike Waveman's empire, the kingdom he once believed would outlive him, was already turning to dust. Not slowly, not quietly, but violently, publicly, and irrevocably. At 6:14 a.m., Mike's personal banker called him, voice shaking. "Sir, your accounts, they've been frozen." Mike sat up in bed, eyes bloodshot, hair wild from a sleepless night. "What do you mean frozen?" "Federal inquiry, sir. They're investigating money laundering offshore transfers. They've blocked access to all of it." "All of it?" Mike repeated, voice cracking. "Every cent." The call ended abruptly. His banker didn't want to be heard helping a soon-to-be criminal. Mike hurled his phone into the wall. The screen shattered like his life. 30 minutes later, Sabrina Waveman, his wife of 12 years, walked into the penthouse living room holding an envelope. Her face was pale. Her hands shook slightly. But her eyes were steady, almost relieved. "Mike," she said softly, "I'm done." He blinked at her. "What are you talking about?" She set the envelope on the table. "Divorce papers. I warned you. I warned you so many times. You wouldn't listen. You told me I was overreacting, that you were untouchable." She exhaled, voice trembling. "But you pushed a woman off a building, Mike. I watched the footage. I saw your face." He swallowed. "Sabrina, you don't understand." "No," she whispered. "You don't understand. You don't get to ruin my life with yours." She turned and walked toward the elevator. As the doors closed, she whispered the last words he would hear from her. "You finally learned you're not God." By midday, the story took another explosive turn. A journalist from the Miami Ledger posted a single tweet. "We have received encrypted files linked to the Rosefield demolition scandal. Developing." Then, minutes later, it happened. Every major news outlet, every investigative journalist, every watchdog group across the U.S. received a mass data dump. Blueprints, fake permits, audio recordings of Mike ordering cheap clearance, emails arranging bribes, offshore account ledgers. At the center of the folder, the blueprint files created by AB. The media erupted. CNN called it the largest real estate corruption leak in Florida's history. BBC described it as a coordinated, pre-scheduled whistleblower drop. Twitter exploded with screenshots, clips, and analyses. Everyone asked the same question: who leaked this? But only one woman knew the truth. It was her failsafe, her final weapon, and it had detonated exactly as she planned. Mike's home, once a monument to power, now felt like a cage. Every screen he turned on showed the same images. Protesters chanting, news segments dissecting the footage, financial analysts declaring his empire dead, senators demanding his arrest. He paced the length of the living room, hair disheveled, shirt wrinkled, face streaked with sweat. "This is spiraling," he muttered. This is insane. Someone needs to fix this." But there was no one left to fix anything. Investors dropped him. Business partners ghosted him. Lawyers resigned one by one. The last attorney who answered his call said, "I'm sorry. You're a liability now." At 3:22 p.m., police officers arrived at Skyhaven with a warrant. Mike didn't resist. Not because he accepted guilt, but because he still believed he could talk his way out of anything. As they handcuffed him, he tried to smirk. "This is unnecessary," he said loudly. "Once we clear this up, you'll all regret this." The officers said nothing. One tightened the cuffs. Amancia lay in her hospital bed, pain radiating with every breath, but her mind steady as the sea. The door clicked open. Two officers entered, followed by Mike Waveman, handcuffed, exhausted, but trying desperately to look composed. A camera crew from the press pool followed. Their lenses zoomed in like vultures waiting for a feast. Mike's voice cracked the moment he saw her. "Amancia, thank God you're alive." She stared at him, expression unreadable. He stepped forward until the chain of his cuffs stopped him. The sound of the metal clinking echoed through the room. "Please," he whispered. "Please, you have to help me." One of the officers cleared his throat. "This is for questioning. Keep your distance." But Mike didn't listen. He leaned closer, eyes frantic. "Just tell them it was an accident. That you slipped. That I tried to grab you. Please. I'll give you anything, money, a mansion, your village back." His voice broke entirely. "I'll fix everything, Amancia. I swear it." For a moment, she simply watched him. This man, once towering, untouchable, feared, was now trembling. Human. Crushed beneath his own lies. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut deeper than any scream could have. "You already took everything that mattered," she whispered. "My home, my peace, my future." Mike's breathing hitched. She continued, "This isn't revenge, Mike." She held his gaze, steady, unbroken. "It's the truth catching up." Mike's face crumpled. The officers stepped forward. "That's enough," one said. As they pulled him back, Mike shouted, voice cracking in desperation. "Amancia, you don't understand. They'll destroy me. Please." But she closed her eyes, letting the silence answer for her. The press footage aired within the hour. Every major network played it on loop. The headlines were merciless. "Billionaire begs the maid he tried to kill." "Waveman breaks down in hospital visit." "Fall of the Miami mogul, from power to handcuffs." "Amancia Brown rejects Billionaire's plea." Clips of Mike crying were replayed, analyzed, slowed down, subtitled. And for the first time since his rise to power, the world did not look at him with admiration, but with disgust. Comment sections lit up. But let him feel fear for once. "She's stronger than he ever was." "Powerful woman." "Justice." #arrest Waveman, #justice for Amancia. Outside the hospital, strangers held signs with her name. People left flowers at the entrance. The global wave of grief, rage, and solidarity rose higher than any building Mike ever constructed. Officers guided him out of the hospital, cameras flashing like lightning. "Mr. Waveman, do you feel remorse? Did you intend to kill her? Why did you push her? Did you know about the illegal demolitions?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no one listened. His voice was drowned out by the roar of the crowd outside chanting, "Justice for Amancia. Lock him up." He stumbled. His knees buckled. For the first time in his life, he looked afraid. Truly afraid. Handcuffed. Swarmed by reporters. Escorted by police. The golden man had fallen. And the world was watching. The courtroom was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that hangs right before a verdict that will change a life forever. Mike Waveman stood between two federal marshals, his once perfect suit wrinkled, his once sculpted confidence reduced to trembling breath. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters sat with pens ready. Protesters waited outside with signs demanding justice. The judge adjusted her glasses, glanced down at the stack of files, financial crimes, forged permits, bribery chains, demolition orders, and finally, the footage that had shaken the world. "Michael Waveman," she said, her voice echoing across the chamber, "for the crimes of attempted murder, large-scale fraud, and environmental destruction, this court sentences you to 20 years in federal prison." The gavel struck. Gasps filled the courtroom. Someone cried out in relief. Outside, cheering erupted like thunder as the news rippled through the crowd. Mike's shoulders collapsed inward. His mouth opened slightly, as if searching for words that no longer mattered. A man who once towered above the city now bowed under the weight of consequences he had spent years believing would never touch him. As the marshals began to lead him away, a reporter shouted the final blow. "Mr. Waveman, any comment about Amancia Brown?" He froze. For a brief second, guilt flickered in his eyes, unavoidable, undeniable. Then he was escorted out of the courtroom and into the rest of his sentence. In the following days, news outlets chronicled the collapse of Waveman Holdings with ruthless detail. The company's stock plunged into oblivion. Executives scrambled to save themselves. International partners severed ties. And slowly, the name Waveman transformed from a symbol of wealth into a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. He flew too close to the sun. He thought he was untouchable. He built an empire on stolen land and broken lives. A legacy of concrete and corruption crumbled under the gravity of truth. But while his world fell, something else quietly rose. 1 month later, after her injuries stabilized and the investigations wrapped, Amancia boarded a plane back to Jamaica. The moment she stepped onto the warm soil of St. Mary Parish, her home, she inhaled deeply. Salt air, sunlight, the distant crash of waves against the rocks. For years she had dreamed of returning here, not with loss in her chest, but with purpose in her hands. Word spread quickly. Amancia come back? Is really she? The whole world was watching her, you know. Villagers gathered along the dirt road, greeting her with embraces, tears, and music. She had left here as the girl who lost everything. She returned as the woman who stood against a billionaire and won. But she didn't return for praise. She returned to rebuild. The ruins of Rosefield greeted her like a scar carved into the earth. Shattered stones, bent metal, empty spaces where homes once stood. But instead of sorrow, she felt determination spark inside her. She walked across the land barefoot, letting the soil she grew up on speak to her again. Children followed quietly behind. Women watched her from the hillsides. Men paused their fishing boats to nod with respect. In her hands, she carried a rolled tube, a blueprint she had protected through hardship, deceit, danger, and survival. She knelt by a patch of ground near the sea. Slowly, she unrolled the blueprint. The pages unfurled like wings against the wind. Homes, solar grid rooftops, rainwater systems, handmade clay walls. Designs adapted from her university days, improved by years of knowledge and courage. A sustainable village. A place reborn from ashes. A future that honored the past. Her hands trembled as she pinned the corners down with stones. "It's time," she whispered. Behind her, a group of villagers approached. "What the name, Amancia?" a little boy asked softly. She smiled. "Hope Haven." The wind carried the name across the coast. It settled into the hearts of everyone listening. It felt right. It felt healing. Construction began the next day, funded by donations from all around the world. People who had watched her story said, "Let her rebuild what he destroyed. She deserves a chance to finish what she started. This village deserves justice too." And so they gave. And so she built. Weeks later, as the sun began to dip into the horizon, Amancia stood alone at the edge of the sea. Her healing ribs still ached. Her mended shoulder still tugged with pain. But she stood tall, stronger in spirit than she ever imagined she could be. The blueprint flapped softly in the breeze. She looked at the rising frames of new homes behind her, volunteers mixing cement, children laughing, elders praying blessings over the land. A place once broken was blooming again. A dream once stolen was reborn. She held the blueprint to her chest, tears warming her cheeks. The ocean roared as if answering her triumph. Then she said the words that would later narrate the final clip of countless documentaries, news specials, and tributes to her courage. "He thought he ruled the sky," she whispered. "But gravity doesn't play favorites." She looked up at the clouds, wide, free, untouched by corruption. "What he built on lies fell faster than I ever did." She turned back toward her village, her future, and walked forward into a new beginning. Hope Haven rose behind her. Justice settled around her. And the world remembered her name, Amancia Brown, the woman who survived the fall and rebuilt everything they tried to take.
Thank you so much for staying with me till the very end of this story. Your time, your attention, and your heart mean the world to me. If there's one message to take from Amancia's journey, it's this. No matter how high someone stands, no matter how powerful they believe they are, truth, courage, and resilience will always rise higher. Real strength doesn't come from money or buildings in the sky. It comes from standing up, even after the world tries to push you down. If this story touched you, inspired you, or opened your eyes in any way, please support this channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this video with a friend or loved one. Your engagement helps these powerful stories reach more people who need to hear them. And I promise, I'll be back tomorrow with another emotional and unforgettable story just for you. Until then, make sure to check out the previous video that's on your screen right now. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, take care, and keep standing for truth.